Hi, I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Grace.
And you're listening to our dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vodacy Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore, and I am super excited. As you guys know, my favorite episodes are diving in and talking to successful short-term rental operators. And we've got one of our Vodacy Empire Club members joining us today, Brian Emch. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to talk about your journey into short-term vacation rental investing. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Shawn.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna dive in. Your wife Susan was a big part of this process. She's not joining us today, so I don't want to forget to mention that she was a big part of this process as we dive into it. But I always like to start, Brian, by just kind of diving into the backstory of where you guys are from, what led you into vacation rental investing, and if you had any prior investing experience before you really dove into this game, and kind of lead the backstory of what pays the bills and what kind of got us our eyes and the target set on vacation rental investing.
Okay. We live in Columbus, Ohio. And what kind of got us started in it, I guess, is you did own my own business. I owned a consulting firm, software consulting, and then I finally got talked into going full time at where I'm at now. They've been trying to hire me for years, and I'm kind of missed doing my own thing. I did that for 15 years, and now I went back to the corporate world, and it's a bit of a shock to go back to that, to say the least, and kind of wanted to do something on my own. So my wife and I looked at I said, hey, how about we do a vacation rental? I saw this program advertised somewhere, and there's Hocking Hills is a cool place. It's near us. Seems to probably a great place to rent at, and did the analysis, and absolutely is. And so real estate's always kind of interested me. Zero real estate experience going into this at all, nothing. So
okay.
I learned a lot.
Brand new. Yeah. So
Yes.
when did that journey start? When did you really start thinking about it? Sounds like you've had the, entrepreneur at heart, and kind of that entrepreneurial bug was kind of biting at you again. And this is kind of probably what led you this direction.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right. I kind of wanted to also diversify some investments, out of the stock market and get into some real estate. Just have some different avenues of investment for retirement. I'm 50, so getting there. And if I can grow this, big enough to quit my day job, I would certainly like to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. And so when did you start looking into this then? How long ago?
Let's see, probably 2 years ago, February.
Okay.
So about 2 years. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. So you started diving in, and you mentioned you're from Columbus, Ohio. You mentioned Hocking Hills, and that was the market that you ultimately targeted. How did you decide or land on that market?
It was close to us. It's only an hour away. So it was easy to go look at properties, analyze them, after you could analyze them, you could actually go look at them really easily, just taking a short drive.
Yeah.
So, and we started going through the course, started analyzing Hocking Hills, and it turned out, wow, yeah, that's a really great area on top of, being close by. So it kind of worked out well. We're looking at beach properties too, because that's something that definitely interests us at some point. But the numbers just didn't work nearly as well as they did for down there after doing the analysis. So we decided, it's close by, get our feet wet with a close by property, and just made us relax a little more too that we were close.
Yeah,
being our first one.
It's there's definitely a comfort level when you dive into markets that you're familiar with. They're close. It's not nearly as scary, especially when you've been on your very first property, right? There's a lot of second guessing when you're diving into something for the first time. And so it's and you guys 2 years ago, the market was pretty dang hot, right? So when you're looking at properties, they're not lasting very long. So how many properties did you end up looking at? How many offers did you guys end up having to make before you locked in on one?
think we made the third offer was accepted. We did some interesting stuff with a retirement account that I had, a SEP IRA from my previous business, where we basically took a 60-day loan out against it and paid cash for the property because we figured cash offers would look a lot better to the sellers. And we even lost out on two all cash offers on our first ones.
Yeah.
And the third one, at that point, we were offering 25,000 over asking, and finally landed on one that got accepted. Was not an STR. It was somebody's primary residence that built it and had lived there since 1993. So there was a lot to do. And what we did was, with that, I mentioned what we did with the SEP was we took out that loan, and then if you put the money back within 60 days, there's no taxes on it. So we did a cash out refi, put the money back in, and just basically used it as a really short-term loan.
Interesting. And that's a real interesting, I always love to dive into the financing options. And that's a very unique way that people to be able to purchase that property. So you ended up borrowing, money, lending yourself the money to go pay cash for the property, knowing that it was kind of that short-term bridge, right? And did you went into it, I'm assuming, with that strategy in mind. And so you probably already had your long-term financing options lined up down the line.
Yep.
And so it ended up being not a delayed purchase. They actually ran it as a cash out refi. You actually refinanced the property.
Yep. That's exactly what we did. Yep. We used Jeff Chisholm from the site there. He was at Gateway at that point, I believe. Now he's at North Point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when they did that, that's and this is a really good point for, every investor, but especially beginning investors, is to look into all of your options. Back then, you were competing with, on a lot of other people, and cash looked good in those competitive situations. But also, don't always assume that you can cash out refi a property after only 60 days. Some places have seasoning, right? They have 6 month seasoning or a year seasoning before you can do something like that. So it's great that you were able to do that, but also went into the game with your eyes wide open, understanding your options, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So what type of a long-term financing loan was it? Did you end up doing an investment loan? Did you do a second home loan? What did you end up?
Second home
loan. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit about the property. What did it, tell us a little bit about, like, kind of what the property was like. You mentioned that it was, it wasn't set up as a short-term rental. I know the story behind what you had to do, but let's tell everybody else some of the things that you were planning on doing, and then what it ended up turning into.
Okay. Yeah. So, the bones of it were really good. It had a completely unfinished basement, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and just, it was, it had been lived in for, 30 years by the primary resident. So there was, it had some nice stuff. We kept 2 or 3 things. It had a really cool old stove that we kept. And other than that, we pretty much, we kept the cabinets, but we tore them out, repainted all those ourselves. My wife does all the designing. She's an incredibly awesome designer. Just really, really, really good at seeing how that kind of stuff fits together. I'm just the labor on that aspect of it. So yeah, we did most of the renovation ourselves. Paid to have some electrical done, but it was we thought it was going to take 3 months, and it took about 6.
Okay.
And of course, cost way more than we anticipated as well. We did put a lot of high-end things in it. We wanted to kind of set ourselves apart with other properties there. There's a lot of properties that have been established, tons of just direct bookings down there, cabin places that have been in business for 20, 30 years. They don't even use any of the OTAs. They're strictly direct bookings, but a lot of their places are really dated. They kind of were just coasting, and now as the popularity of the Airbnbs and VRBO, there's a lot of competition down there that has some really, really nice properties now. And we, like I said, we finished the basement, put a game room in down there, added a bedroom, so it's a 4-bedroom now. And the game room was a really big addition. That gets compliments all the time. People love that part of the property.
So did you end up adding a bedroom or two as well when you finished the basement?
Yeah, we added one, and we had to put an egress window in down there. That was one of the expenses that was, kind of not really thought about. I mean, as soon as we started doing it, I'm like, oh man, we got to put an egress window in down here. And that was another, $7,000 we weren't expecting to spend. So, just if anybody's thinking about renovating a basement, just remember you need to put an egress, some escape route out of there.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a bedroom. So, and those aren't cheap, and they're very difficult to find people to do, because it took us, I think it was 4 months waiting on this company to get down there and do it. So that, that's
Yeah. And you unpacked a few different things throughout that. You said the budget was a lot, it ended up costing a lot more than the actual budget.
Yep.
And it took longer, right? I always tell people, when you're diving into a renovation, plan on about double the time they're going to take you, which is about right where you came in. And then you got to plan on some contingencies with your budget. And some of it is planned and some of it's unplanned, right? Some of the things you dive into and you think, I'm going to do this. And then you get into it and then you start to say, well, I'm actually going to take it up a notch or two, and you spend more money there. But there's some of those things that are unplanned that you have to do when sometimes it's things you don't think about, like the egress windows in the basement. Other times it's things like, you dive into a wall and you realize there's some plumbing issues, or there's some things that we have to deal with when it comes to, that we didn't plan on. And so that's where renovations can start to, eat into your budget and then take more time as well. So it's not always that they just always are double. It's just, there's a lot of unknowns when you start tearing stuff apart.
Yes, absolutely. And another expense that occurred, an unexpected thing, that you just well pump died, just, that's another not cheap thing. That as you're buying a property that's a little older, it's 30-year-old property, and it was the original well pump, and
you're
time for it to go.
and you got to have some water somewhere, right? So you got
to exactly.
Those things are fixed. And you mentioned another thing that's a really interesting point for people is a lot of these really established markets and established properties, they end up, they do become dated and they end up sort of coasting a little bit. But as the playing field starts to go up, and as it becomes more and more popular as short-term rentals, our job as a host is to treat it and continue to raise the bar. And so, like you said, there's a lot of really nice properties in most areas. In your area particularly, you said, the competition is getting pretty, I mean, there's some nice properties. And so as you go through this, you want to compete there and you want to be able to do that. And so you end up getting it done. How, when you ended up launching it, when did you end up, what was the launch date? Were you on the tail end of a peak season? Were you going into a peak season? How'd the timing line up for when you actually launched the property?
Kind of tail end of peak season, as or what we thought was peak season. So, we were expecting winter to be really slow. And we launched Thanksgiving, let's see, it would have been 2021. It was our first guests were Thanksgiving weekend. So it was a 4 or 5 day stay. And in our market, it's typically a two-day stay, 2 to 3. It's a weekend getaway area. So, we were expecting open weekends in the winter, just kind of a slow time. Nope. Open weekends were not a thing. We actually had our first open weekend last weekend since we launched.
Wow.
And we actually ended up blocking it. It probably would have rented later in the week with somebody last minute, but we're like, nah, we're going to go down and enjoy it.
Actually use it. Yeah. Actually turn this into a lifestyle asset, right?
Yeah. So, we ended up blocking that weekend because, we use dynamic pricing. So the price point couple days before's, it's not like we'd make something, but it's, we'll just go use that weekend.
Awesome. Love it. And so you mentioned you're using dynamic pricing. How did you set up the management on the property?
We're using Evolve right now.
Okay.
And I say right now, because we've been having some tiffs with them, I guess I'd say, as far as something that they don't really elaborate on when you sign up with them is they do something along with their dynamic pricing, which we absolutely love. It's the model is great. We, our gross was almost double what I projected. So that is good, but they do dynamic minimum night stays too, which I do not like in our area because it's typically 2 days. All our summer right now is at 3 days.
Yeah.
And nobody can book it because most people are doing one. If we could get the rates it's at right now on the weekend in the summer, I would be thrilled. But most people aren't doing 3 days. I've emailed them. I went all, I joined LinkedIn with the paid version so I could message all the upper level executives.
Yeah.
I was a pain in their butt. I'm pretty sure they don't like me when they see emails come in from me. I'm guessing they're like, not this guy again, but they can't shut it off or they won't, one of the two. So we're probably going to be leaving them this summer and doing it on our own, just because that 3-day thing is absolutely killing us. So anybody thinking of Evolve, make sure you ask about that aspect of it.
Yeah. And it's important with any management company, right? You need to understand what their policies are for photos, minimum night stays, pricing. Like those are all things that as an owner, those are 3 key things, in my opinion, that it takes to really understanding your market to maximize our assets. And it's not the same across the board. There are some markets that 3-night minimums aren't a big deal. 2 nights can make it doesn't seem like a big deal when you hear it. But like on all my properties, I have 2-night minimums. And so, and we maximize them, because of what you're saying. I'm a fan of having shorter minimums to maximize our calendars. And that's not always a popular opinion by a lot of management companies. And so you want to make sure that you have those conversations. Absolutely. And understand it.
Yeah, it's it's not something they really tell you. They tell you all about their dynamic pricing. We in fact, I don't know if I ever would have known they were doing it had. So there's some Facebook pages for Hocking Hills that I go on, and if somebody says, hey, we need a cabin, I'll put our link. And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, we want to rent this. And then they messaged me back and said, well, you have a 3-night minimum. I was like, we do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I didn't even know. And that, that was really frustrating at that point. And, the guest was great. They called Evolve and had them do 2 nights, but most guests aren't going to do that. They're going to go find another property. I mean, and that's when the frustration began, is that I didn't even know they were doing it. They don't mention it at all when you're signing up. I'm sure it's buried somewhere in the 50 or 60 page legalese contract that I, didn't read every single word, my fault on me.
Yeah.
But, it's something they should disclose more, in my opinion, because it's a pretty big aspect to some people, and it probably would have been a deal killer had I known it when we were talking to them.
Yeah. And on to a lot of owners that are listening to this, a lot of people don't realize that even that is that big of an issue. And so sometimes it's even hard to, even if you did know on the front end that was that it was 3-night minimums or 4 or 5 or whatever it ends up being, that you don't have the flexibility to change it to what works in your market. See, markets aren't the same across the board. And so it's what we're wanting is the flexibility to make sure that we make those adjustments. And so, make sure that whoever's helping manage it, that they allow you to do that, because that can be something that really, that can really put the handcuffs on maximizing your asset. Because especially in weekend markets, if you're in a weekend market, because I've got another member who's in a very much a weekend market, and her nightly rates on the weekends, and she only gets 2 nights on the weekend. She books every single weekend. It's a weekend market, but that's where they make their money, right? Similar to your market.
Yep.
But her nightly rates on those 2 days that she gets on the weekends is huge compared to the midweek stays. And so she doesn't really care hardly if she gets the midweek stays, but almost every one of her bookings are 2 nights, and she has a great performing property when it comes to the overall numbers. But that's really important to make sure that she can capture those 2 nights.
Yeah, and that's the problem. See, it does drop the Evolve. It's a dynamic. It drops the 2 nights as it gets closer, just like pricing.
Sure.
So we have Evolve lets you set up like a minimum, which we have 2 nights, but then they dynamically do it,
adjust it based on
And the problem is
demand and timing, right?
Yeah. But the problem is the prices come down by that point too, when it goes to 2. And that's what I tried to explain to them. And the problem is you can't prove it in any way that it makes a difference. There's no real way to show, it's, and the problem is too, there's a property that opened, quarter mile up the street from us that's very, very similar to ours. And they're a 2-night minimum. Guaranteed they're getting those further out bookings than we are, because it's, ours is a little nicer, but theirs is comparable and 2-night minimum.
Right. Yeah. And the more flexible we are as hosts with the guest, the more you're probably going to be able to book your property out. Right. And so, there's that's interesting. And these are kind of lessons we learn and why we have these conversations to share with other people as you're diving into this. And that's why I always ask about the management side of it. I always ask about the financing side of it, and being able to kind of go through some of the lessons that we learn as we dive into it. Those are major aspects of the game, right? And then ultimately so you had the property. It's been almost a year and 4 or 5 months now, right? That you've actually had it operational. And you mentioned that you're, as far as you're projected and, when you were underwriting the deal, it sounds like you hit your numbers and then some and did a little bit better than what you were anticipating. So that's awesome. How's it looking going into, after you've gone in and out of a peak season, you're kind of learning the different times that is peak. I always find it interesting too. We always assume that the summer is always going to be the busiest. And I think that sometimes we, overlook the fact that people want to, especially in the winter, there's less things to go do. So we get this cabin fever. We actually want to get away in the winter too. So weekends do really well in what we assume would be a slow season in those types of areas.
Yeah, I mean, I was absolutely shocked the number of people that still go to that area in the wintertime. And they specifically go, one, it's not as busy. If you're willing to hike in the cold, it's really pretty. I mean, it's beautiful, especially if it snows or there's, some ice that is formed. It's gorgeous. It's families go down, they their kids come and they can. I didn't even think about this, but there's a small hill on our property. They bought a sled and they're like, "Oh my gosh, your property is great for sledding." And it's something I never even thought of.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's my favorite time in almost every one of my properties, and maybe it's the antisocial aspect of me not liking big crowds, but it's my favorite time is the slow season in every one of my properties. Most areas are really fun when kind of the crowds go away. You get to really enjoy kind of the natural beauty of a lot of these areas in a different aspect than you normally would see it in the busy time.
Yep. And, we found too, we get spring break, like this month, spring break, we get, families staying during the week, which was completely unexpected when forecasting. April and March get a lot of weekday bookings.
Yeah. Awesome. How's when it comes to really optimizing the marketing side of it, is there anything you're doing outside of kind of the normal things that we talk about, or is there anything that you're doing or you're planning to do on the marketing side to optimize and maximize?
Yeah, it's something we need to get better at. I mean, Evolve's handling a lot of the marketing right now.
Sure.
And if we take it back over, then we'll be doing all that. We haven't set up a maximizer site yet, which we plan on doing, but we've also been in the midst of renovating another property, which we said we'd never do again, but did it anyway.
I think I just had this exact conversation with Elise a episode or two ago, and that's what I said. I did the same thing. It's like every time I'm in the middle of one, I say I'm not doing another one, and sure enough, we do another one because the finish once we see the finished product, it's we forget about all the heartaches in the middle of it.
And we can get into that one a little later if you want to, and continue talking about this what's going on now. But yeah, that one we're doing totally ourselves. Again,
is it going to be another short-term rental, or is it just
nope.
Okay,
short-term in the same area. Yep. So
nice.
we came across a deal that it's actually a property that has 2 cabins on it. One was in rough shape, the other one is in extremely rough shape. So we're finishing up on the small. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, really small. But the property it's on is absolutely amazing. It sits about 300 feet up, overlooking a big stream. Just the property itself is beautiful. The cabin itself, horrible. Just the reviews on it, 3 stars, and I don't even know how it had that. So it was a rental, but it was not taken care of. One of those owners that was coasting.
So this is a major renovation then.
Yes.
Diving into it.
I'll be posting the entire story once we finally get open. There's actually some pictures of it over on the old Facebook page from when we
I was
bought
gonna
it
say, you've
over
been
a
working
year
on this
ago.
for a minute. I remember a couple pictures where I could see the outside dirt when you were
Yes.
standing inside the house.
Yes, it was
Underneath the property, right? Is that the right
yep,
one?
that is the one. Yep.
Yeah.
The block foundation put on, total subfloor ripped up, it gutted. And the other one is the same. The other one's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. That's going to be a big, probably a couple $100,000, 150 renovation. But we got the property for an extremely good price for that area. And just decided, if we fix these places up, this property is probably going to be worth 700,000-800,000 once we get both the cabins fixed up. So
nice. And so you're not in a huge rush on that one. You're doing that
No.
yourself, and you're gonna get through the process. And
that's kind of funny. We said, okay, we're going to get contractors to do this one. We don't want to, we'll pay this time.
Yeah.
Terrible contractors. One guy, it's in that area. It's so remote. It's so horrible to find good contractors. The one guy not show up. Oh, I'll get there, not show up. Ditched him. Got a guy that helped us on our other one that we thought was good. And then he ended up telling us we needed to rip our whole bathroom out. Turns out I don't believe him after I went and looked at it. He screwed the plumbing all up. So I ended up fixing all that myself. So we basically ended up doing the whole damn thing ourselves anyway. The only good contractor we found out of this whole mess is a concrete guy.
Yeah. So you're putting it all back together.
Yeah, pretty much. We were like, okay, well, we'll pay someone to do it. It'll get done faster. No, did not. We could have done it ourselves. Another thing to look for too is it took 10 months to get our well dug. There was no well on it because it was attached to the previous owner's property. They just sectioned off that property and sold it, but they still own like 80 acres. And they said, hey, you got to have to put a well in. So that was 10 months waiting to get that done.
Yeah. To get that drilled and everything else. So when is your estimated completion on those two cabins going live?
So hopefully this weekend on the small one.
Okay.
We're just wrapping things up, hoping to get pictures taken this weekend. And the other one, hopefully start the renovation on, which we're not doing ourselves. Hopefully found a good contractor down there this time. He's done about 30 renovations exactly like this, old cabins that are run down. Nobody's been the other cabin, by our estimate of what was left in it, which was a VHS collection of about 300 tapes. We're guessing nobody's been in it for about 20 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's in decent shape. The bones of it are, and this guy has done like 30 cabins down there similar to that. So he's like, look, this is what I do. This is my bread and butter. I love doing these renovations. So hopefully we found a good one this time.
Good. Yeah, good. And that's another lesson when you are working in remote areas and you are working in some out of the way areas. Sometimes it is difficult to find, contractors and service professionals. And so when you dive into these areas, there's going to be a few more challenges. It's not like being in Columbus and there's people everywhere, right? And so some of these remote areas that we do buy these types of properties in, it is more difficult to get work done. And so that's another challenge and something that people should be aware of as they dive into some of these areas if they are planning on doing major renovations or a lot of work.
Yeah, and that's, you touch on finding help too, cleaning. We've been cleaning the place ourselves for a year, which is a lot of work and a lot of time. So we actually just yesterday had our first set of cleaners come in and do that. So we're hoping we can find some good ones down there and, get rid of that off our plate and concentrate more on the marketing aspect and stuff like that.
Nice. Did you, how did you find the ones that you're starting to use now?
There's a owner's site on Facebook for the area, and just kind of reading through that and finding recommendations and these folks. The problem is most of them that have recommendations don't have any openings.
Right. Yep. The good ones are tough because they're busy, right?
Right. So they had an opening because somebody had left. So they said, yeah, we can do it. And they said they can probably do our small one we're open too, because that's going to be an easy clean. I mean, it's only 400 480 square feet.
Yeah.
It's a tiny cabin. It's very small. So that's probably like an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So.
it. That's a quick one for them. And they're close.
Yep.
Yep.
They're very close. They're like, they live on the same, in fact, state highway that our cabins are on, they said. So.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And I always love to share that Facebook groups, especially owners or area Facebook groups can be really good resources when you, especially in those areas that are smaller, talking and getting recommendations. There's some companies that are popping up for cleaners and maintenance people specifically for short-term rentals that we've had a lot of luck with inside of our group. It was Turnover B&B, but I think it's called Turno now. Turno. But if you look up Turnover B&B, that's a good resource for cleaners, maintenance people, boots on the ground type of help for these types of properties. And and you'd be surprised at how many small areas are covered. And so, yeah, something to look into and obviously share with our audiences. Don't overlook those local Facebook groups and owners groups in your local areas that you're at, because a lot of people are, they're we always like to recommend good help and good professionals. And so you can a lot of times find some really good professionals and help in those areas. So as you dived in, going through it, obviously you didn't get too scared away from the renovation, because you dove right back into another one on properties, next properties. But as we've kind of covered a lot of different learning points through this process, which is really fun, and which is why I love to dive into these case studies. What does the future look like? Are you hoping to continue to grow in that area? Or you mentioned the beach, earlier, are you guys going to kind of expand outside of the Hocking Hills area? What does the future look like for the portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to do a beach property at some point. We like the like Nags Head, Outer Banks kind of area. That's one of the places we vacation at. So that's on our radar at some point. Real estate down there when we first started looking, was just absolutely ridiculous. The numbers just, while they worked a break-even point, maybe they just they weren't going to cash flow. It didn't seem. Just because the off season there is truly an off season based on it's pretty much nothing for 3-4 months. So we're we'll maybe started running the numbers for Hocking Hills, and I was like, wow, these numbers actually work really, really well. So seems like a good starting point. So it is something we want to we've learned a lot, and doing a beach property now would make more sense. I think even if it doesn't cash flow as much, we'll still be cash flowing at our other properties and can use some of that if necessary to augment on the beach side.
Supplement the beach property depending on where it's at. Awesome. Well, as like you said, you learned a lot. I always like to end with one question, but before we end, I always like to tell you thank you, for sharing the story. It's really important. We live in this world where kind of sometimes we don't share our wins as much as we probably should. And so it's always, I love these episodes where we can share our wins. Really exciting that you're going on to about 1.5 years now with property number 1. Sounds like it's been a really great success, a lot more revenue than you were anticipating. Those are always really fun stories and fun things to happen, right? Even though there was some challenges along the way, and being able to share that, right? It's obviously the proof is in the actions that you're taking, that you're still in the game and you're buying more properties, right? And continue to do it. And so I really appreciate you coming on, Brian, and sharing that story with everybody and our listeners. When you go back, if you went back to the very beginning and had to give yourself some advice and say, after I've learned all these different things, what would be some of the number one things you would tell yourself before starting this journey?
I mean, one of the big things is, especially if you're going down the renovation route, is really try to have some contractors lined up even before you purchase the place. And if you can, have them look at it. The problem is when we were buying, you couldn't do that. I mean, you were putting an offer in the property went on the market and it was sold the next day. There was wasn't, can I get my contractor to come in and look at this? There was none of that, and now you might be able to do something like that. But That's something that I would definitely say is and try to find those owner groups in the area. I didn't know about the owner group. I was on another Facebook group, and somebody from down there said, "Hey, you should join the Hocking Hills Lodging Owners Group." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yes, I should."
Yeah.
So definitely search that out as you're doing properties, because someone will even let you in if you're just interested in purchasing. I know they do there sometimes. Somebody's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I'm buying down here," and that resource is absolutely fantastic, because there's 300-400 people on there that have, some have been doing it for 20-30 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most are willing to help out and share. So it's
Nope.
definitely one of the things I do.
Yeah, awesome. And great advice. And those owner groups should not be overlooked, right? I mean, because and you can just search on Facebook, just
Yep.
type your area, and then, you'll find these groups start to pop up. And in fact, the property that I was, I tapped into an owner group on Facebook we were trying to put a dock. We have a property that we bought in Georgia, and we're on a little lake, and we were putting in a floating dock, and I needed a contractor to build a floating dock. And I went to that
Yep.
owner group. Sure enough, I have 3 or 4 people that do that. And I was
Yep.
having a hard time finding one. And that Facebook group was, I mean, all of a sudden, immediately, as soon as I put that in there, there's people saying, "Oh yeah, we had them build ours, and here's a picture." And you can,
Yep.
so they can be an invaluable resource. And I love the advice of saying, really dive in to making sure you get your contractors specifically you're talking about, but really all your partners, right? We've got,
Yep.
when we dive into, I always talk about our step-by-step process.
Mhm.
Our process is really after diving in and understanding and planning out the game ahead, we figure out the location we're going to. Then we build a dream team of partners way before we go into the acquisition phase and making offers and everything else. You really do want to do that before you're buying the properties, because you want to know what professional team you've already got built and resources that you have available as you dive into this game. And if you're finding that contractors are difficult to come by, and nobody's around, nobody's to be had, everybody's too busy, you might make different buying decisions
Mhm.
when you're looking at properties that need renovation. So it's a really great piece of advice to say, hey, really build that list of partners and understand who's available resource wise before you buy. And I think that's a great piece of advice that hasn't been shared on on the podcast before. And I think it's great.
Yeah, one more thing too that you made when you brought up the dream team thing. Our first real estate agent stunk.
Yeah.
So definitely make sure you get a good real estate agent. We did purchase the first property through her, but she was not good. And now we do have somebody that's grew up in the area, local to there, great guy. He'll shoot me stuff, properties, say, "Hey, Brian, this is coming on, market pretty soon." He'll just, I'm like, "I don't have the capital for it right now, but thanks for thinking of me."
Sure. Yeah. At least
it's-
somebody that is, out there thinking about you, understands the market,
Yep.
knows what you're looking
Yep.
for, hopefully sending you
Yep.
properties that fit
Yeah.
your needs and buyer goals, right? That's
Yep.
absolutely. It's they're a huge resource for us, and finding the
Mhm.
right one, just like
Yep.
any other professional. Realtors are not all created equal. Contractors are not all created equal. Management companies are not all created equal, right?
Yeah.
So we have to find the right ones that fit our property goals and
Mhm.
understand what we're looking for as buyers and investors.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Brian. Well, listen, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. These are really fun episodes for me. I enjoy these probably more than anybody, because I get a chance to sit down and talk with not only our members, but successful short-term rental investors, and being able to share that with our audience. And those of you listening and joining us, we know how valuable your time is, and we always appreciate you sharing it with us and spending it with us. If you got any value out of these episodes, I always ask that you give us a like or a thumbs up on YouTube or on our podcast platform. If you have more than 30 seconds, give us a review, share it with somebody you know. And always, I leave you with one challenge, and that is to go pick one thing that you can do today to go start building that life that you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website? Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodacy.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.